Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 8th day of March 2021. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather winds. We had some really strong winds with that intense frontal boundary that pushed into the western interior and northwest interior. Cape Lisburne up there on the western Arctic coast. Winds, peak wind gusts, 100 miles per hour. Cape Newenham, a lot farther to the south there on the Yukon Delta coast, 78 mile an hour peak wind gusts. And then back up to the north there, Red Dog Dock had a 74 mile per hour peak wind gust. And then into the interior there, western interior, 63 mile per hour winds at Donellan. And some areas, especially the higher elevations, had winds gusting 80 to 90 miles per hour, especially over the western Brooks Range area. And good winds extended down along the southwest coast as well, but not that strong into the Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay area. Anyway, moving on to the hazardous weather graphic. We've got winter storm warnings for the western central Arctic coast until this evening. I believe until 9 p.m. this evening there for the Arctic coast. And then let's see, it's out until 9 p.m. for the northwest, or for the Noatak Valley there, the northwest coast, Kotzebue, Kivalina, where that's a blizzard warning. That's out until 9 p.m. this evening. And for the Kobuk Valley there, Ambler, that winter storm warning's out until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. But you'll probably notice an improvement in the conditions here overnight tonight. Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island. Again, that's out until early this evening, so about ready to end in those areas. In fact, it's really improved much. It's much improved there, St. Lawrence Island, from what it was. Yukon Delta, wind weather advisories there for the lower Yukon River Valley area, on up into Grayling up to Galena until early this evening. And then a wind advisory out for tonight, the entire night, for the western Alaska Range for winds gusting to 50 miles per hour from the south and southeast. And then that wind weather advisory for the eastern Arctic coast North Slope areas, that's out until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning for gusty winds and blowing snow. Visibilities down to less than a quarter mile at times. And the south central Alaska, you got the Susitna-Matanuska Valley Anchorage area into the eastern Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound. That's a winter storm warning for possible heavy snow that kicks into effect Tuesday morning and is out until Wednesday morning. At that time, again, it's just possible 4 to 11 inches of snow could fall, with 11 inches being the highest amounts. They're probably over the western Susitna Valley areas. Say for Anchorage in the forecast, I noticed it was 4 to 7 inches possible falling tomorrow night into early Wednesday morning. And from there, we'll move on to satellite imagery, and you can see that front moving eastward slowly. It's almost lying parallel to the wind flow aloft, but the entire pattern is shifting eastward, with the upper level ridge shifting east from the eastern interior there. You can see a lot of clearing skies over the Gulf of Alaska, and just some higher stuff into the southeast interior areas, and big trough out over the northwestern Bering Sea. And that entire pattern is finally pushing that front eastward. But you can see it's really weakening, getting shredded there over the mountainous terrain of the interior. A lot of holes showing up in it, but still some pretty good winds even at this time going on there, the northern, or from the Yukon Delta on up into the western Brooks Range, western Arctic coast areas. Otherwise, warmer temperatures pushed in with those southerly winds. Some areas southwest interior west of the Alaska Range are in the upper 30s to lower 40s, and mid-30s showing up there for eastern Norton Sound area. And then to the east, a lot drier and less wind, central and eastern interior. And the southeast coast, a band of moisture down there kind of stuck over the area, keeping some precipitation in over that location, mostly in the form of light snow, wet snow for the Petersburg area, Wrangell, and then some rain down around Ketchikan. and a few tenths of an inch falling at Sitka, right on the northern edge there, with, I believe it was Hoona was the farthest north any measurable precipitation occurred in the last 12 hours there, with only 1 or 2 hundredths of an inch. And snow showers, colder air coming into the Aleutians, 30 degrees with snow showers, gusty winds out of the west at 35 miles an hour out over AKwx, and also St. Paul, southwest, 25 to 35 mile an hour winds with snow showers, temperature, again, right around the freezing point. And rain along that front. Heaviest amount was at Falls Pass. They had a 24-hour amount of about 1¼ inches. Cold Bay picked up 1/2 inch and about 1/3 of an inch. For the Pribilof Islands, gives that water equivalent precipitation. And on the chart, there's about the location, kind of a new low center forming there, roughly around Shishmaref, northern Seward Peninsula, and the snow and blowing snow, strong winds ahead of that. You can see very tight gradient extending eastward in the central interior now. And again, blowing snow earlier, but by this afternoon, I noticed the mixed rain part, or the temperatures was such that it definitely wasn't falling as snow, with 40 degrees showing up in some locations. And definitely some rain, Kodiak Island. And then a pretty good break behind that, as I mentioned, really improving there for St. Lawrence Island this afternoon, as well as along the west coast, with some weak ridging ahead of several troughs, actually a weak low northwest of the Pribilofs, bringing snow showers, colder temperatures in, snowfall levels back down to sea level, pushing into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, here later on tonight, but the interior dry, variable cloudy to mostly sunny south of the Alaska Range, a lot of clearing in the Gulf of Alaska and the northern Panhandle, but rain and snow showers holding on to the southern southeast coast along with mostly cloudy skies, but wind a non-factor in that area and will continue to be a non-factor tomorrow. In fact, it'll be less of a factor everywhere in the state tomorrow, with snow showers pretty numerous out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, and that slowly moving system. In fact, moving slow as it is, that's why the chance for heavy snow, once it starts, it'll take a while to shut off. Again, possibly 4 to 11 inches in south central Alaska, Madawaska-Sitna Valley, and slowly snow edging to the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, improving back to the west, snow showers over the western interior areas. And again, rain and snow showers chances linger, but trying to shut it off down there just has a hard time moving that boundary of moisture out, with high pressure keeping control over the northern Panhandle and the eastern interior areas, but not like it has been. And then for Tuesday, or I'm sorry, let me go back the other way. Big storm comes up from the south, makes a really good jog right up into the Montague Island area. And again, strong winds pick up, especially the western Alaska Range down across Kodiak Island, pulling the cold air southward once again. And looks like 45-knot winds for the marine areas, Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, gales for the Kodiak Island area, and then lighter winds as you head west, weak low, rain or snow, western Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, but not too bad actually out over the Aleutians with high pressure near St. Lawrence Island, western interior drying out, a little cooler, light snow, western Arctic coast, light snow, eastern Arctic coast, and area snow extending from that old low, say near Old Crow, right into the central interior. Rain and snow north Gulf Coast, south central Alaska, and then precipitation on the increase, along with somewhat of a wind increase for the north coast of the Panhandle, but partly staying mostly sunny and light winds for the southern Panhandle. Moving on to the lows for tonight, upper teens there, say near Skagway, Haines, 2 upper 20s on down toward Prince of Wales Island, Ketchikan and Net. A little below 0 for the Copper River Basin, upper teens to near 20, south central Alaska, but lower to mid 30s for the coastal areas of the Kenai Peninsula. And staying fairly well above 0 for the Tanana Valley, except over toward North Wyandotte and the upper Yukon Valley, 0 to 10 below to the eastern Arctic coast, single numbers on the west side, and teens there for the lower Yukon River Valley area to the Yukon Delta, and near 20 for the Kuskokwim Delta, upper teens, Bristol Bay, and mid-20s for the western Aleutians, and right around 30 degrees, Adak and Atka, St. Paul, lower 30s, Alaska Peninsula. Highs for tomorrow, mid-30s to mid-40s for the southeast coast, and in the 30s, southern Alaska, even the Susitna Valley, looking for high Talkeetna near the frost point, 40 for Kodiak, 26 Galena, mid to upper 20s, Bristol Bay into the Kuskokwim Valley, Tanana Valley, mid to upper 20s, mid-20s give or take, teens for the Brooks Range, and 5 to 15 there for the Arctic coast, and in the teens for the Seward Peninsula, near 10 for St. Lawrence Island, and in the 20s, mid to upper for the southwest interior, lower 30s for the Bering Sea. And the lows following morning on Wednesday, mid-teens for the Copper River Basin, so warmer there, no more below zero at least for a while, and upper 20s to mid-30s for the south central Alaska area near 30 Kodiak Island, mid-20s northern Panhandle, upper 20s, lower 30s elsewhere, mid-teens Bristol Bay, a shade below zero for the Brooks Range, and then about maybe 15 below or so for the western Arctic coast, Seward Peninsula, to St. Lawrence Island. Lower 20s and Pribilofs, in the 20s for just about all of the Aleutians, upper 20s to near 30 for the Alaska Peninsula. And for the highs, lower 30s to mostly lower 40s for the Panhandle, upper 20s, lower 30s, southern Alaska, Copper River Basin, upper 20s. And a little below zero, western Arctic coast, a little more below zero for the Seward Peninsula, and 30s for the Aleutians.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather for Tuesday morning, with that slowly drifting, with that frontal boundary weakening, slowly drifting east, we got a narrow band of IFR that extends from Kodiak Island up along the southern Kenai Peninsula and then across southern Cook Inlet up along and just mostly east of the Alaska Range there on up and through the central interior to the east central Arctic coast with marginal VFR from the DeLong Mountains into the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula, the Yukon Delta, and VFR, southern Bering Sea, most of the Aleutians, and into the southwest interior. Southern Panhandle still holding on to some marginal VFR, but VFR up to the north and the Copper River Basin into the Matanuska Valley. And then for Tuesday afternoon, IFR, southern Cook Inlet with the remainder of that front. Marginal VFR, though, for northern Cook Inlet, western Copper River Basin into the central interior. VFR east side, eastern interior areas, Copper River Basin. Panhandle looks good, VFR. And the Bering Sea south, central and southern areas, mostly VFR, some areas of marginal VFR. And for Wednesday morning, we've got, again, the next system coming up, so it's going to increase the IFR in across the southern Kenai Peninsula into Prince William Sound, eventually even in the North Gulf Coast. It'll extend back to the western Alaska Range through Kamishak Bay, Iliamna, into northeast Bristol Bay, and possibly into the Kuskokwim Valley. But that'll extend up to the Alaska Range and just a narrow band there over the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, marginal VFR up to the eastern Brooks Range. VFR for the north slope, but a band of IFR extending from roughly Atchison Point Lay area or Wainwright down in across the Kobuk Valley, southwest along the lower Yukon Valley. And then VFR, northern Bering Sea. Bering Sea not looking too bad for the next couple of days. VFR and marginal VFR for Wednesday morning and the afternoon. Not much change, a little bit of an expansion of the marginal VFR there north of the Aleutians and just southwest of the Pribilofs, but still lots of VFR for the Aleutians, Bristol Bay, west coast through the Bering Strait. In fact, all about the western part of the state to the central North Slope and Arctic coast. IFR, so sit in a valley around the central Brooks Range area, maybe as far north as Haisley or possibly in the Nana, otherwise marginal VFR up across the upper Yukon River and Flats area. And then IFR in a band there from turning an arm eastward along all the North Gulf Coast down across the central and western Panhandle. And moving on to, I'm going backwards there. Let's see. Moving on to, there we go, passes IFR to VFR for Anatuvik. Same trend for Adigan, IFR to VFR. So improving throughout the day. Lake Clark and Merrill, though, IFR and then rainy, starting out marginal, and then some more moisture coming in for IFR flying conditions there. Windy, VFR to marginal, with marginal VFR mostly on the southern approach. Isabel occasionally marginal, but Mentasta will go for VFR. Tanita, VFR becoming marginal. And Portage, VFR becomes marginal as well. And Chilkoot and White, good VFR. Freezing levels at the surface right along the outer coast of the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, down along the Alaska Peninsula, but north of almost to the Pribilofs, so north of the eastern Aleutians, 2,000 feet shifting eastward there now east of Kodiak Island. And icing, look for areas of considerable moderate icing, not a big area, just along the western Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast. And then areas of lighter icing northward along the weakening front into the northeast interior, pushing in toward Elfin Cove. And taking a look at the jet stream. High pressure ridge continues to slip eastward, and that'll allow that front to slowly move eastward as well as weaken. 90 to 125 knots from the southwest there, it looks like right over the Kuskokwim Valley. But southerlies, mostly east of the Panhandle, at least the strongest wind core, or I'm sorry, northerlies, north to northeast there. And for 9,000 feet, high pressure, southern Gulf of Alaska, 60 knots from the south of Kodiak Island, otherwise 35 to 50 knots over the interior, up to 70 knots there for the Bering Strait. And at 3,000 feet, lighter winds, though, 25 knots ahead of that trough axis there from the Yukon Delta coast up across the western Arctic coast. Pretty light, though, over the remainder of the state and the interior. And then with that next storm coming up, already you can see the stronger winds coming in there, but well south of Kodiak Island at 65 knots. That system could be tracking due north. But for tomorrow, turbulence really not much of a problem, kind of a break in between systems. Light to isolated moderate chop southern Kenai Peninsula, Nulato Hills, western Brooks Range area, maybe the St. Lawrence Island zone, but much improved what's been safe for today and overnight last night. So pretty smooth over the remainder of the interior, on down to Dixon Entrance, and even the Aleutians and the Bering Sea not seeing much in the way of storminess.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, joined again by Eric Stevens from the GINA, or Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thanks for joining us again, Eric.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. We are talking about satellites today, and what are satellites? And the easy way to talk about that would be to introduce our friend the globe here, which is a round spheroid type shape. We haven't been on a flat Earth as far as history is known for several hundred years now, and because of that we also know that we are orbiting around other objects in space, and that objects are orbiting around the Earth as well. We call all those things satellites in some form or fashion, right, Eric?
Right. Well, this leads to the discussion of Johannes Kepler's research 400 years ago. Did some of the early work and founded the 3 laws of planetary motion, which are important to planets and also to weather satellites.
Okay.
Kepler's first law talks about how the orbit of an object around another object is an ellipse, not necessarily a circle.
Kind of a flattened circle?
Yeah, depending on how flat
squished
it could be.
Okay.
For our purposes, we'll just say they're mostly circular.
Okay.
The second law is most important for us, though, and that is the closer an object is to the thing it's orbiting, the faster it goes. So in the solar system, the planet Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It orbits the sun in 88 days. It moves at 100,000 kilometers an hour.
It's a lot different than Earth.
Moving.
Okay.
Right. And further out from the Earth is Jupiter, and it moves at only 1/4 the speed of Mercury, and it has to go further, so it takes 12 of our years for Jupiter to make one lap. The further out you are, the slower you go.
Okay.
So we're talking about planets. Why? What does it have to do with weather satellites? Turns out Kepler's laws apply to planets orbiting the sun. They also apply to satellites orbiting the Earth.
Okay.
You know, our natural satellite is the moon. There's the famous Apollo 8 Earthrise shot.
Beautiful shot.
Oh, yeah, you could just talk about that forever. December 1968, the moon is about 250,000 miles away from the Earth.
Okay.
It takes a month to go around the Earth. It's that far out, it takes a full month to do an orbit. Another shot here of the International Space Station. Instead of being 250,000 miles out, the ISS is only 250 miles up. It's really close. And so it doesn't take a full month for the space station to go around the Earth. It only takes 90 minutes. It's so close, it just whips right around 90 minutes.
Okay.
So weather satellites, there are a number of weather satellites, and there are a number of orbits. The further out you have the satellite, the longer it takes to go around the Earth. And this is important because different satellites have different purposes. So we have a satellite here. This little salt shaker lid will serve as our satellite going around the Earth. Let's say you have a satellite that's 22,000 miles above the Earth. This is kind of a magical spot because at that distance, it takes a full day for the satellite to go around the Earth. Imagine if you put your satellite 22,000 miles up from the equator and had it go with the Earth as the Earth spun.
At the same speed.
Right. The satellite goes around the Earth just as fast as the Earth itself is turning. In effect, the satellite will hover in one spot.
I see.
And it appears when you make a movie loop of picture after picture after picture, you can replay that and you get these movie loops. Geostationary satellites, these are called. These are stationary in appearance. And they provide a constant frame of reference. We've got an example here. Another nice thing about these satellites, since they're that far out at 22,000 miles, you can see from pole to pole, which is nice. So they're pretty broad view and a constant frame of reference.
So those are the pictures. If you're watching a weather satellite loop on TV, your favorite weather show, that's the picture that you're going to see is one that's sitting over the same spot.
If you're seeing a movie loop play again and again, that came from geostationary satellites. That's the only way you can do that.
Yeah.
The bummer, though, for us in Alaska is
Yeah.
we're up on the very top of the planet. And for geostationary satellites to work, they have to be over the equator. So for the geostationary bird to view Alaska, it's kind of like reading a book, but you're reading it edge on like that.
Right.
So there's another kind of orbit called the polar orbit,
Okay.
which is nice. We're near the pole.
Yeah.
And here's a satellite. Those polar orbiters are much closer to the Earth, getting down toward International Space Station elevation. And they're not in the equatorial plane. Rather, their orbital plane is inclined like this. And the Earth turns under that satellite as the satellite orbits. The nice thing about that is for Alaska, the satellite will go right over Alaska a few times a day. And so you get a much closer image. We've got a shot from the Sumi NPP satellite. Specifically, it's a true color image from the VIRS sensor. That's an acronym there.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful shot of Alaska, and you can see so much detail, the kind of detail because you're close in.
Very high resolution.
Well, you couldn't get this kind of view from geostationary satellites. The advantage of these polar orbiters is nice close imagery. You can see a lot of detail. The disadvantage, though, is that the satellite flies by,
Right.
and then you have to wait a while to get the next image. And if geostationary weaknesses are that you're reading the page like that, the polar orbiter, you're reading the page straight on, but it's so close, and then it zips by, and you have to wait for the satellite to come around the Earth again. So there's no one perfect solution. Different satellites for different orbits. Each has their strength, and amazingly, it all comes back to Johannes Kepler and his laws of planetary motion. The same laws that govern how the planets orbit the sun, they govern how the satellites orbit the Earth, and even our little pretend salt shaker right here.
Right. Okay. Well, since the 1957 Sputnik, we've been putting man-made objects into orbit around the Earth and starting to get pictures back. Who knows what will happen in the next 50 to 100 years? Amazing
it's
stuff.
a growing science, and the future is bright.
Thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. And for more information on GINA and what the satellite systems do there and what Eric's been talking about today, you can go to the web address on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Not a lot of change from yesterday. Kind of right around, mostly on the main sea ice north of St. Matthew Island there, and then south of Nunivak Island, about the same distance it's been for the last couple of days into Bristol Bay. And Cook Inlet, not much change there. Probably seeing about the southern extent for the next couple of days there of the ice south of the Forelands. And it looks like a kind of a lead there opening up in southern Norton Sound. And for the coastal water forecast, we've got northwest winds 15 knots on the south coast of the Panhandle with 6-foot seas tomorrow. Lighter winds up north coast, west-southwest at 10 with 5-foot seas. And the Lynn Canal zone, southeast 15 knots, seas 3 feet. Stevens Passage, east at 15. Clarence Strait, northwest winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet. And winds come up a little bit, but not too bad. Small craft advisories on the north coast there. From the west, 25 to 30 knots with 15 to 20-foot seas. And then south to west winds 20 knots for the south coast. And southeast 15 Clarence Strait, southeast 20 for Stevens Passage. And Lynn Canal, southerly winds at 20 knots with all those sea heights at about 4 feet, give or take. And for Prince William Sound, light east winds tomorrow with slight seas. 10 knots on the wind speed, and south 15 for the eastern North Gulf Coast, southeast 15 western North Gulf Coast, 4 to 6-foot seas there. And the Barren Islands, south winds 20 knots, seas 7 feet. Cook Inlet, northeast breeze 10 to 15 knots, seas in the ice-free waters, south of the Forelands there at 3 feet. But small craft advisories, Kamishak Bay, where winds will be northwest at 25 knots with 5-foot seas. And then big increase on the winds there Wednesday with that low tracking up in toward Montague Island, say. For the western North Gulf Coast, west winds 40 knots and then almost storms, but not quite. But right now 45 knots from the northwest. Looks like a good forecast for both Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands. And small craft advisory, southern Cook Inlet with northwest winds 25 knots, north 15. Northern Cook Inlet, southerly gales there for the eastern North Gulf Coast at 35 knots, and Prince William Sound, winds increasing northeast 25 knots, seas at about 4 feet. In Kodiak Island tomorrow on the east side, south 20 knots, and then from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, small craft advisories, northwest 25 knot winds with 10-foot seas, and then west-northwest winds for the Alaska Peninsula at 15 knots, seas at about 8 feet. Even lighter winds for Bristol Bay, west at 10, seas 4 feet. And then for Wednesday, east side of Kodiak Island, northwest 35 knots. That's good for gale warning. Small craft advisories for 30-knot westerly winds in Shelikof Strait. Small craft advisories for the Alaska Peninsula. West-northwest 30 knots, seas 9 to 10 feet in Bristol Bay. Northwest winds 20 knots. Eastern Aleutians, west-southwest at 20 tomorrow with 8 to 10 foot seas. Not too bad. And Adak and Atka, west-southwest 20 to 25 knots, 8 to 10 foot seas. And then 20 knot winds from the west from Amchitka to Shemya. And then for Wednesday, look for some gales to come back into the western Aleutians from the south, 35 knots, mostly towards Shemya and Attu. Otherwise, we've got 20 knot winds from the southwest for Amchitka Island, Adak and Atka, northwest 20 to 25 knots, 20 to 25 knot northwesterlies also for Unmak and Unalaska Islands. And moving up to the southwest coast tomorrow, southwest winds 15 to 20, and small craft advisories for the Pribilof, southwest 25 knots, west 20 for St. Matthew Island, and light winds there for St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound out of the south at 15 knots. Those turn westerly at 15 knots, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island. Light winds along the Yukon Delta coast, almost call it variable, but the arrow shows north 20 knots, Kuskokwim Delta coast. Small craft advisory, St. Matthew Island, south at 25, northwest 20 for the Pribilofs. First wind advisories, extreme eastern Beaufort Seacoast tomorrow, 25 knots from the southeast, otherwise west at 15, eastern Arctic coast, and then south 20 on the central coast. 10 to 15 knot winds from Cape Thompson up to, say, Point Lay on the west side, and then 15 knots from the south from Wales to Cape Thompson. And then 10 to 15 knot westerly winds for those areas, so the western Arctic coast all the way down to the Bering Strait. Not too bad, 20 knots out of the west for the central coast, and then southeast 20 for the east side. And for tonight, that front slowly moving eastward, and the winter storm warnings end early this evening for the areas that have the western Arctic coast, Seward Peninsula, northwest coast, and Noatak Valley down to the Seward Peninsula and the Yukon Delta. Probably end first. And that weakening front brings snow into south central Alaska, beginning to increase, mostly hanging up along the western Alaska range, but slowly moving eastward. High pressure, trying to dry the southern panhandle out. It will be dry in the north, and lots of snow showers over the Bering Sea.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.